A girl with short brown hair thinks of destruction, imagining an earthquake or a meteor strike. Smiling blonde-haired girl approaches the brown-haired girl from behind, saying her name, Alexa. Whack. With a vicious smile, the blonde girl slams Alexa's head down onto her desk. Trembling with a flushed face, Alexa is interrogated by the blonde girl for not doing her homework. The blonde girl menacingly grabs Alexa's chin, calling her annoying for getting ahead of herself. Pow! The blonde girl slaps Alexa with a book, then smirks and apologizes sarcastically, claiming her hand slipped. Alexa looks up in shock as a pen and a shoe are thrown past her head. With a bright red mark on her cheek, Alexa glares back, her eyes filled with humiliation and fury. As a clock ticks backward and time seems to reverse, the blonde girl stares in disbelief, muttering that it's nonsense. From Alexa's point of view, she sees her classmates frozen in time and wonders what is happening. A beautiful woman with long, pale white hair and golden eyes appears, stating she simply stopped the scene because it was noisy. The mysterious white-haired woman gives a slight, knowing smile. The white-haired woman gently holds Alexa's face, who stares back in shock and asks who she is. The woman introduces herself as Grandishea, then condescendingly calls Alexa a fool for getting beaten up. Grandishea critiques Alexa's body, saying she should have chosen a better shell, leaving Alexa annoyed and confused. Alexa bursts out in frustration, demanding to know if Grandishea is a Grim Reaper, a ghost, or just an exhibitionist. Grandishea laughs, amused that Alexa, whom she met 200 years ago, is calling her a Grim Reaper. Meanwhile, Alexa grows angry at her reaction. Grandishea watches a stunned Alexa with a confident, knowing smirk. Smirking from below, Grandishea listens as Alexa demands to know what she's talking about. An unseen person declares their intent to be the one to kill Alexa, who looks on in shock. Grandishea maintains her smug, confident smile. Time suddenly lurches back into motion as Alexa frantically shouts for it to wait. The world unfreezes, and her classmates blink in confusion, one asking, "Huh?" The students look around the classroom, bewildered and wondering what just happened. In a loop of the previous confrontation, the blonde girl angrily blames Alexa for dropping her new pen, while Alexa thinks her annoyance is endless. The blonde girl continues to scream in a furious rage. After being called a dumbass, Alexa looks back with a calm, almost defiant expression. Enraged that Alexa is ignoring her, the blonde girl screams and demands to know where she's looking. Though she thinks to herself that she's scared, Alexa intercepts the blonde girl's attack, grabbing her wrist. The blonde girl stares in absolute shock as Alexa firmly holds her fist, stopping her attack. Ah. The blonde girl groans in pain and disbelief, enraged that Alexa is fighting back. As Alexa pulls back her fist to strike, the blonde girl recoils in confused panic. With a mighty crack, Alexa punches the blonde girl, suddenly recalling a thought about dying, not from a punch, but from a broken skull. Blood splatters across the scene as she remembers her dying wish from a past life, to be reborn strong and talented. The scene shifts to a tranquil garden of purple wisteria, where someone says they will finally have a dragon. In a grand hall, a long-haired man in a royal red cloak impatiently asks if the egg will finally hatch today. An older man advises the king to be patient, but the king smirks, thinking of how elusive Eileen is. The king turns to his white-haired advisor and threatens his life if a mere bird hatches from the egg. The nervous advisor protests, but quickly reminds the king of his promise to make him a duke. A loud cracking sound echoes through the throne room. The king, his advisor, and other nobles stare in shock as a large egg on a pedestal begins to crack. The egg shatters, revealing a newborn, white-haired baby peacefully asleep inside. The newly hatched baby, with white hair and golden eyes, is declared the dragon of the Yulia Empire and the guardian of the king. A credits page appears, listing the names of the creative staff under the title Leslie and the Victims. A notice board invites readers to join a Discord community and thanks them for reading. The king smirks at a terrified Duke Gilbert, mocking him for nearly losing his life, but confirming it is indeed a real dragon. The newborn baby, now named Eileen, cries amongst a shower of yellow flowers. With a sinister grin, the king points and declares that Eileen will be both the dragon and the king of the Yulia Empire. The scene transitions to a grand, sprawling, European-style castle or academy. A gentle breeze flutters a white curtain near a window, adorned with pink blossoms. The scene transitions to a lavish, sunlit royal nursery, where an ornate red and pink cradle sits waiting. In her new cradle, The baby Eileen thinks to herself that she likes her new name. Eileen recalls Grain de Shea, wondering if she is also a dragon, since the mysterious woman claimed to be one. Gazing at the magnificent palace, Eileen considers that being the king's beloved dragon might not be a bad life after all. As her stomach rumbles, the reincarnated baby suddenly realizes she feels hungry. Surrounded by an aura of fiery rage, Eileen gets angry that no one is coming to care for her. She tries to call for help, but her shouts only come out as frustrated baby noises. Huh? Eileen is startled as she notices someone with blonde hair peeking over the side of her cradle. The scene shifts to an outside view of the grand, sun-drenched castle on a clear day. Inside a richly decorated room, an unseen person asks someone if they already know why they were summoned. A nervous young woman in a blue dress, identified as Pia Saltern, says it is an honor to be there. Piat stands silently before the king and Duke Gilbert, who are seated at a desk piled with books. Duke Gilbert angrily interrogates Piat, demanding to know why she isn't answering, and if she realizes her brother's crime. Snap, the furious Duke threatens to destroy Pat's entire family for what her brother has done. As an image of a prison cell appears, he warns that he could have her locked away for life. Duke Gilbert then offers a deal, promising to spare her brother and restore her family's honor. He shouts that she should be grateful for the chance, causing Piat to tremble in fear. Clenching her fists, Piat furiously thinks to herself that Duke Gilbert is a cunning old fox. A flashback begins as an unseen voice calls out Piat's name. In a sunny forest, a young man with brown hair greets Piat, who recognizes him as Will. Will excitedly shows Piat an ornate egg he found, declaring it's a dragon egg, leaving her utterly shocked. He gushes that this is their family's chance to achieve the highest rank in Yulia, a thought Piat sadly confirms. A vision of a mighty white dragon roaring before an army illustrates the immense power they represent. Piat narrates that owning a dragon is like having the power to unify the world, and that every noble would covet it. Piat nervously suggests putting the egg back, but Will refuses to let the opportunity slip away, even as she expresses contentment with their current life. Determined to make their family name historic, Will decides to take the egg to the king, a decision Piat reluctantly accepts. Piat trembles, recalling how she knew they were too powerless for such a gambit as images of her terrified brother and enraged father flash through her mind. In the throne room, the king's voice booms, accusing a kneeling Will of trying to fool him with a fake egg. As guards point their swords at him, Will desperately insists the egg isn't fake, but the king roars in fury. Piat realizes a real dragon egg's carvings cannot be erased, meaning the egg was swapped before her brother presented it. Duke Gilbert barely hides a smirk, and as Piat watches him, she realizes with dawning horror that he is behind the treachery. Looking across the crowded hall, Piat watches Duke Gilbert and realizes he must have been the one who swapped the egg. Duke Gilbert steps forward, politely asking the king for permission to speak. The king icily warns Gilbert to have a good reason for interrupting or lose his head, but the Duke confidently presents his own item. A wave of gasps and murmurs ripples through the royal court at the sudden turn of events. Duke Gilbert triumphantly holds up the real dragon egg, proclaiming it as genuine, while the king looks on with a smirk. Will realizes he's been framed as the king declares this treachery will be the end of the Saltern family. Piat narrates the grim outcome. Her brother was imprisoned, and the treacherous Count Gilbert was promoted to duke. The gates of their family estate are shown as Piat thinks about how their family has fallen. Back in the present, Piat gulps, thinking that the king's order is unexpected, as she was ready for prison. Realizing she has no other option, Piat decides her life is more important than her family's lost honor. Piat bows before the king and, with a flourish, pledges to do anything to serve him. The king agrees with a sinister smile, warning her that anything includes risking her life. Piat gives a solemn nod, accepting the dangerous terms of her new servitude. The scene shifts back to baby Eileen's nursery, where a blonde-haired boy cheerfully offers her food. A delicious, perfectly roasted chicken sits on a plate, sparkling invitingly. Gulp, baby Eileen drools with excitement, her eyes wide at the sight of the magnificent meal. Eileen takes a huge, ambitious bite out of the entire chicken leg. Eileen holds the drumstick, frustrated that she can't actually eat it, while the confused blonde boy looks on. Overwhelmed with frustration, Eileen bursts into tears as the boy panics, mistakenly asking if she's crying because it's too tasty. Wah! As Eileen continues to cry, the panicked blonde boy asks her to wait, while two maids are seen rushing down the hall. Two maids, a younger one with brown hair and an older one with white hair, burst through the door with expressions of sheer panic. The maids rush toward the cradle as the brown-haired one desperately shouts for Prince Eric. The white-haired maid, Jeslyn, asks a worried Prince Eric if he's hurt, but he assures her he's okay, while Eileen wails beside them. Eileen continues to cry inconsolably while Jeslyn looks on in horror, her monocle nearly falling from her face. Holding Prince Eric, Jeslyn scolds him for being in a dangerous place, while the brown-haired maid wonders if the baby is the dragon. As he's carried away, Prince Eric clarifies that the baby's name is Eileen, who wails for her lost meat. Eileen furiously thinks that's not why she's crying at all, as tears stream down her face. Jeslyn tells the prince they must leave before the king discovers them, saying she wouldn't be safe. Before leaving, Jeslyn sternly reminds Piat that she is in charge of this area and must take good care of it. Piat weakly protests, but Jeslyn is already gone as Prince Eric looks back, promising Eileen he'll return. Now holding the baby, Piat thinks about how fast everything happened, and is surprised that Eileen isn't as scary as she imagined. Eileen glares with teary eyes, demanding to be fed now, and wondering if Piat has ever seen a crying baby before. Piat smiles warmly, thinking to herself that Eileen looks normal and not at all like she expected. The scene transitions to the grand castle at night, lit by a silvery crescent moon. A quiet moment passes as leaves blow through the dark, rustling woods. From a tree branch, a cloaked figure silently observes armored guards patrolling the grounds with lanterns. Click. The cloaked figure stealthily slips through a palace door. The cloaked assassin, dagger in hand, looms over Eileen's cradle and wonders if this is the target. Raising the dagger to strike, the assassin is startled as Eileen's eyes fly open in shock. The assassin's eye glows red as they recognize the sword, while a terrified Eileen realizes she is in grave danger. As the dagger plunges downward, Eileen's eye glows with a brilliant, golden reptilian light. Whoosh! The assassin recoils, yelling that it's hot as Eileen unleashes a torrent of fire, realizing it was a mistake to think this would be easy. The surprised assassin stumbles back as a young man with dark hair and a sword suddenly appears in the doorway. The dark-haired young man leaps into action, ordering the assassin to step aside from the baby. ARGG! The assassin cries out as they are struck, and blood splatters across the pristine floor. Piat arrives with a lantern, her face a mask of disbelief at the violent scene before her. The dark-haired young man, identified as Robert, Prince of Empire Yulia, holds Eileen and asks if she and Prince Robert are okay. Prince Robert sternly reminds Piat of the baby's importance to the Empire, while Piat apologizes, concerned about his wound. Robert orders her to keep the attack quiet, vowing to find who is behind it, but a shocked Piat suggests they must report it. He firmly states that showing weakness will only invite more attacks, recalling the bloodied assassin. Piat thanks Robert for protecting Eileen, and he explains that he came because he heard a loud noise. Robert apologizes for his harshness and entrusts Piat with the baby's protection, which she solemnly accepts as he departs. The scene shifts to a stunningly beautiful glass conservatory filled with colorful flowers and fluttering blue butterflies, leaving Eileen in awe. Piat cheerfully pushes Eileen's cradle through the sunlit garden, remarking on the beautiful day. A shiver runs down Piat's spine as she reminds herself they must be more careful after yesterday's attack. Eileen watches a butterfly, realizing Piat is talking about the assassination attempt from the previous night. Recalling the stream of fire, Eileen realizes she can breathe fire because she's a dragon, a power she didn't know she had. Eileen considers practicing her new ability later, which earns a confused look from the oblivious Piat. Piat suddenly spots Prince Robert having tea in the garden and gasps his name in surprise. Flustered, Piat worries that Prince Robert will be upset to see them taking a walk and debates whether to say hello. Deciding it's better to leave, Piat begins to turn the cradle around, much to Eileen's confusion. Prince Robert calls out, asking if she is Piat, who turns back with a nervous smile. He graciously invites her to have some tea, gesturing to the elegant spread on the table. Piat nervously accepts the offer, trembling at the thought of having tea time with the prince. Robert reassures Piat that it's safe to take a walk, as they are allowed to do so when it's not busy. Eileen observes Prince Robert, wondering why he speaks to her as if she's fragile. Prince Eric suddenly appears, joyfully calling out to Eileen and Piat, while a surprised Robert watches his arrival. Overjoyed, Prince Eric runs through the beautiful garden, filled with blooming flowers. Leaning over Eileen's cradle, Prince Eric asks if she'll be his little sister, while a vexed Prince Robert asks if he's even listening. Prince Eric pleads with his brother not to be mean, but a vexed Prince Robert demands to know what he means. Prince Robert scolds Eric for his poor manners, warning him that no one will want to be his friend if he continues acting that way. The two princes, Robert and Eric, both turn with looks of surprise on their faces. A beautiful blonde woman in an elegant blue gown appears, asking what the two of them are doing here. Framed by flowers, Sophia, the Queen of Yulia Empire, sternly demands an answer from the boys. The Queen expresses her deep disappointment in Prince Robert as Piat watches from the background. Looking disappointed, the Queen reminds Robert she has told him many times to be nice to his brother, yet he was mean. Prince Eric excitedly asks the Queen if it's true that the one who possesses a dragon can unify the world, surprising Robert. Initially surprised, the Queen smiles and observes that Eric seems very interested in the dragon. Queen Sophia confirms the legend, adding that it's the reason their father wanted a dragon so desperately. Blushing, Prince Eric proudly states that the dragon's name is Eileen. The Queen repeats the name Eileen, her expression shifting to one of confusion. Her confusion turns to shock as she realizes Eric has actually met the dragon. Eric points toward Eileen's cradle, confirming that she's right there, leaving the Queen speechless. Realizing who Piat must be, the Queen addresses her by name, and Piat bows respectfully, honored to meet her. The Queen's eyes glint with menace as she tells a terrified Piat that she must really want to die. Queen Sophia furiously admonishes Piat for bringing the dangerous baby near the princes, questioning her judgment. Her face darkened by shadow, the Queen stares down at the cradle and menacingly whispers the word dragon. The Queen orders Piat to keep the thing away from her sons, adding a chilling warning about what to do if it blackens. Ordering Piat not to hesitate, the Queen's parasol glows ominously as Eileen watches in terror from her cradle. Piat stares in wide-eyed horror, realizing the Queen just ordered her to kill the baby. Whoosh! In a flash of defiance, Eileen unleashes a powerful stream of fire directly at the Queen. Stumbling back in shock with her bangs singed, the Queen cries out in disbelief, "Fire!" A narrator explains that the reason for the Queen's newly scorched bangs was the baby dragon, a fact that sends a red-haired, bearded man into a fit of roaring laughter. Annoyed by the laughter, Eileen thinks about the new target on her back and resolves to practice turning over, wishing the man would leave. Piat holds Eileen, praising her for getting so good at turning over. Piat asks the red-haired man if he's busy, while Eileen internally debates blasting him with fire to make him go away. The man, Knight Commander Sir Temerin, proudly boasts that he's always busy, as the king trusts him with everything. Sir Temerin laughs, incredulously asking about the baby dragon. Eileen looks up with wide, innocent golden eyes. Piat cheekily suggests that if he's so busy, he can watch Eileen for a bit, much to Sir Temerin's shock. Sir Temerin protests as Piat leaves, saying the maid chief needs her and that she'll be back shortly. Wah! A panicked Sir Temerin exclaims he doesn't know how to handle a baby as Eileen begins to wail. Sitting uncomfortably on the floor, Sir Temerin awkwardly holds the crying baby, pleading for her to stop. The knight struggles to hold the squirming baby, who tugs at his beard. As Eileen gently touches his face, a suddenly sentimental Temerin muses that this must be what having a niece is like. Thump. Piat returns just as a startled Temerin nearly drops Eileen, who he nervously claims he was about to drop anyway. Piat urgently announces that the king is coming to see Eileen, stunning Temerin, who notes this has never happened before. Piat worries to herself that the queen now hates her, recalling the royal's angry expression. The scene transitions to a grand view of the palace and its manicured gardens. Piat narrates that the king will be Eileen's greatest protection, as the stern monarch is shown in his regal glory. Eileen sits quietly, now dressed in an adorable yellow frock with a large red bow. Piat presents a beautiful, ornate hair clip, explaining it's a gift from the king, who is sad he couldn't give it to her himself. Piat excitedly prepares to put the new clip in Eileen's hair, while Eileen thinks her nanny seems very happy. The scene shifts to an exterior shot of the stately palace facade. Piat presents Eileen to the king and his attendant, announcing that they have been waiting for his highness. Wearing her new dress and hair clip, a delighted Eileen waves and babbles happily. The king observes her, noting with some concern that she's growing unusually fast, wondering if it's because she isn't human. As Eileen babbles DDA, the king looks down in shock, wondering if she just called him daddy. The king looks at the happily babbling Eileen, wondering what she is trying to say. With wide, innocent eyes, Eileen looks up and clearly babbles, DDA. The king stares down in absolute shock, asking aloud if she just called him daddy. Piat quickly explains that daddy is an easy word for babies and means nothing, pleading with him not to be upset. Means nothing. Sensing his mood, Piat asks the hesitating king if he would like to hold Eileen. Piat assures him it's fine if he doesn't want to, as Eileen reaches out, continuing to babble. Taking the baby, the king remembers holding Eric and Robert, thinking to himself that his plan is working as Eileen giggles happily. The king gently holds a content Eileen, as Piat laughs nervously in the background. Smiling warmly at Piat, the king asks if everything was all right while he holds the snuggling baby. Piat recalls the attack she missed while getting milk, remembering how Prince Robert saved Eileen. The king notes that Robert had the best teachers, and the situation would have been dire without him. His expression hardening, the king demands to know if the assassin was captured and who orchestrated the attack. The king's face is grim, as he considers the dangerous situation. He looks down at Eileen, remarking that while she is a dragon, she is far too small to protect herself. The king tells Piat he knows it's difficult to care for a baby alone and promises to send help. An elderly man, Duke Gilbert, appears at the door, having been looking for the king, and Piat recognizes him. Duke Gilbert angrily scolds Piat, demanding to know how she dares stay in the same room as the king. Eileen watches the confrontation, thinking to herself that Duke Gilbert is the one all the maids dislike. The king calmly asks what the matter is, and Duke Gilbert reports that a suspicious person has visited the castle. Piat listens as the king is informed of a, quote, drunk person with the seal, prompting him to investigate. The scene shifts to the magnificent and ornate gates of the royal palace. A cloaked figure walks past two guards, who warn that they will be watching closely. The cloaked visitor smirks, thinking that their cooperation depends entirely on the guard's behavior. Now in the throne room, the cloaked figure is questioned by the king about a letter they supposedly sent. The figure reveals himself to be a young man named Kiwi, boldly introducing himself as the dragon tamer. The king smirks, intrigued by the young man's confidence, and thinks to himself that he's interesting. The scene shifts to a grand view of the palace, as Kiwi asks if the king truly has a dragon. A horse-drawn carriage moves along the path of the beautiful, manicured palace grounds. Duke Gilbert erupts in anger, questioning if the king even knows who this person is. Kiwi snaps back, demanding Duke Gilbert show respect to the king. Duke Gilbert is left speechless as Kiwi sarcastically asks if he should kiss the king's feet. The king silences a stunned Duke Gilbert, stating that he wants to talk with Kiwi. The king confirms the young man's name is Kiwi, which he affirms with a confident smile. The king refuses to answer Kiwi's question, stating he can't trust him, which surprises Kiwi, who asks if this is a test. Kiwi argues that since the king summoned him, it must mean he requires his assistance. He declares that his purpose is to help keep the Yulia Empire strong and make the dragon theirs. Leaning forward with a grin, the king asks if Kiwi is claiming he can actually control dragons. Kiwi proudly displays an ornate leash and collar from his grandmother, boasting that he knows all about taming animals. The king and Duke Gilbert recoil in shock, asking if he intends to use them, to which Kiwi questions if that's a problem. Kiwi explains he won't use the items yet but will eventually, promising not to be harsh with the dragons. The king suddenly wrinkles his nose and orders Kiwi to take a shower, not wanting Eileen to smell him. Kiwi yells back that he smells of drink, and does, in fact, shower as the scene pans to a grand fountain. Back in the room, Piat closes her eyes, lost in thought. A moment later, Pai is fast asleep in her chair. The room is now silent, with Piat sleeping soundly and Eileen lying awake in her cradle. Eileen gazes out the window, thinking how peaceful it is now. She flashes back to breathing fire on the assassin, wondering how she managed to do it. Her thoughts turn to the surprised queen, questioning what will happen with her now. Eileen remembers the fear she felt, but also the powerful surge of fire she unleashed to protect herself. Eileen internally reflects on her newfound power, wondering where she should direct the blast. Unable to contain it any longer, Eileen unleashes a massive, uncontrolled stream of fire from her mouth. The fiery torrent erupts in a blinding, powerful blast of heat and light. Sizzle! The flames dissipate, leaving behind a trail of smoke and glowing embers. Holding a wide-eyed Eileen, Piotr gasps in shock and confusion at what just happened. Piotr frantically checks on Eileen, asking if she is okay after the sudden outburst. As smoke rises from a scorched section of the cradle, someone internally wonders how the fire started. Piotr sits down, relieved, thinking how lucky it was that she had a glass of water nearby to put out the flame. Fearing the worst, Piotr asks a silent Eileen if this was another attack. As Piotr watches with concern, Eileen is overcome with a sudden and persistent case of the hiccups. Piotr's worry turns to amusement as she smiles at the adorable hiccuping baby. A new voice addresses Eileen by her full name, prompting a startled Piotr to demand who the stranger is. The visitor, a young man named Kiwi, introduces himself, thinking Eileen is prettier than his grandmother described. Kiwi explains that the king sent him, as his grandmother was the nanny for a dragon named Grain, and he amiably suggests he and Piotr be friends. Eileen is shocked by the name, internally recognizing Grain as a mean girl. Kiwi confidently offers his help, stating he grew up learning how to tame, feed, and train dragons. Holding Eileen protectively, Piotr glares at Kiwi, questioning why he's talking about taming her like an animal. Kiwi smiles condescendingly and agrees to her point, for now. Kiwi casually calls Piotr sis and asks to see that, prompting her to snap back that she's not his sister. Ignoring her protest, Kiwi excitedly asks to see the hair clip, but Piotr clutches Eileen defensively, stating it's a gift from Prince Eric. A voice suddenly shouts for Kiwi to stay away from Eileen, catching him and Piotr by surprise. Eileen's eyes widen in recognition as she realizes who the voice belongs to. Prince Eric charges into the room, angrily refuting the idea that he's just a kid. Leaping through the air, Prince Eric furiously accuses a bewildered Kiwi of being an arsonist. Stunned by the accusation, Kiwi demands to know what the prince is talking about. Prince Eric unleashes a fierce flying kick aimed directly at Kiwi. Thud! Kiwi is knocked to the floor as a stunned Piotr and Eileen look on. Prince Eric lands perfectly, a triumphant and proud grin on his face. Eileen stares in disbelief, thinking to herself about what is happening with Kiwi. Getting back on his feet, Kiwi ignores the attack and calmly presents a book to Eileen. Kiwi explains that since Eileen's teeth are growing, she has to start eating baby food, revealing a bowl of disgusting-looking stew. Refusing the food, Eileen asks for Piotr, but Kiwi informs her that Piotr is away reporting the previous day's events. The scene transitions to a grand, sunlit corridor within the palace. Piotr returns to the room carrying a basket, cheerfully announcing she's back. Kiwi proudly gestures to an empty bowl, boasting to Piotr that Eileen ate all of her food. Horrified, Piotr asks if he fed Eileen snake stew, which Kiwi confirms, much to the baby's shock. Piotr lets out a terrified scream, crying out Eileen's name in panic. Clutching a trembling Eileen, Piotr frantically asks Kiwi if he's sure snakes are good for dragons. Kiwi winks reassuringly, telling Piotr that Eileen enjoyed it, prompting Piotr to nervously ask what other foods dragons like, about having to cook bizarre food, while Kiwi calmly explains that such things are highly nutritious for dragons, even if they can eat anything. Kiwi pats Piotr's head, saying he's recalling something his grandmother said, which only confuses her. In a chilling tone, Kiwi reveals a warning from his grandmother. Once a dragon tastes human flesh, there is no going back. A disturbed Piotr quietly repeats the words, human flesh, to herself. Kiwi smirks, suggesting his grandmother's warning must have come from a real incident. Kiwi muses that it's possible since all dragons are different, while Piotr remains lost in thought. Thinking about man-eating dragons, Piotr looks down and notices Eileen seems sleepy. As Eileen drifts off to sleep in her cradle, she wonders about the dragon from Kiwi's story. In a cosmic dreamscape, Eileen floats among the stars, pondering what kind of dragon she will become. A massive, scaly golden eye opens as a voice says, "You are up, Eileen." The view reveals the immense, powerful body of a magnificent white dragon. Huh! The magnificent white dragon from Eileen's dream looks down in confusion at the tiny baby nestled on the grass below. The massive dragon's eye fills the view as Eileen, looking up, wonders if she is seeing a real dragon. Staring at the immense creature, a shocked Eileen is left utterly speechless. In a dark, ethereal space, a question hangs in the air. Do you trust humans? As three crowned silhouettes stand in the background. A beautiful woman with long, white-pink hair weeps sorrowfully against a cosmic patterned backdrop. Eileen's eye reflects the weeping woman as she internally questions why this is happening. A brutal vision unfolds, showing a bloody battlefield littered with corpses as a figure looks down at a white, scaled hand. Standing in the rain, the white, pink-haired woman clutches her blood-spattered gown in despair. The dream flashes through a painful memory. The woman apologizes to Eileen, a man cries in the rain, and another man confronts her with a knife. Waking from the nightmare, Eileen groggily sees a concerned Piot, asking if she is okay. With tears in her eyes, a feverish Eileen weakly tells Piot that she feels sick. Piot holds the whimpering baby, her expression turning to alarm as she realizes Eileen is burning with fever. Piot frantically tries to rouse an unresponsive and feverish Eileen. The scene transitions to a grand fountain sparkling in the sun outside the palace. Sunlight streams through an ornate arched window, shifting the scene inside the palace. The king sits by Eileen's bed, demanding to know what happened and if the doctor, Hyber, was called. A distressed Piot explains that Kiwi went for the doctor, but a fanged and furious king asks if she can guess why this happened. Thwack! The king violently slaps Piot, who cries out in shock and pain. Holding her stinging cheek, a tearful and flushed Piot blames Kiwi for the incident. Enraged, the king screams, "You fed her what?" and accuses a terrified Piot of making excuses as she begs for forgiveness. Piot spots Kiwi and a man in glasses named Mr. Haber arriving, calling out their names in relief. With Mr. Haber examining Eileen, the king anxiously asks for her condition, while Kiwi sits quietly on a nearby sofa. After his examination, Mr. Haber reports that Eileen just has a slight fever and will recover with rest, advising Piot to watch her closely. The king expresses his relief at the news while a flushed Piot stands beside him, still shaken. The king stands tall in his black robe, framed by an elegant floral background. The king remembers rushing to Eileen's room, his expression a mix of worry and determination. A sweet illustration shows Eileen giggling with pure, unadulterated joy. Overwhelmed by her cuteness, the king blushes and covers his mouth, admitting to himself that she is adorable. Eileen happily calls out Dada, then seems to realize what she said, internally questioning Daddy. Noticing the king's stunned silence, Piot asks if he's all right, to which he quickly replies, yes. The king falls into a thoughtful silence, a slight smirk playing on his lips as Piot wonders what he's thinking. The king dismisses Piot's concern, telling her it's nothing and that they should leave a now sleepy Eileen to rest. The scene transitions from the grand palace exterior to a peaceful, sunlit room inside. Eileen awakens with a start, feeling a gentle hand holding hers. Eileen sees Piot sleeping at her bedside and remembers that she had passed out from her fever. Watching her loyal maid sleep, Eileen thinks Piot's name with affection. Elsewhere, Kiwi complains to a clearly annoyed Prince Robert, who sits with his arms crossed. Yawning, Piot wakes up with a start, much to Eileen's amusement. A confused Piot looks around, wondering how long she was asleep. Eileen greets the newly awake Piot with a bright, happy wave. Piot carries Eileen for a walk outside, where Kiwi and Robert are waiting, telling Eileen she wanted to go out as soon as she woke. Prince Robert observes them, thinking his worry was unnecessary now that the one-year-old is talking and walking. Kiwi speculates to a shocked Robert that the snake stew must have helped Eileen, since she is a dragon, after all. Piot gasps in amazement as she helps a determined Eileen take her first wobbly steps in the garden. Eileen stands triumphantly on her own 2 feet, cheering that she did it. Eileen toddles happily toward the boys as Piot calls out to them, warning Eileen to slow down. A strange feeling comes over Eileen as she gets goosebumps, thinking she doesn't like it. Kiwi suggests buying Eileen shoes now that she's walking, but Robert quickly scolds him for trying to spoil her. Prince Robert urgently tries to get Kiwi's attention, telling him to listen and wait. Robert's face contorts in horror as he curses, realizing something is terribly wrong. Swoosh, an arrow suddenly flies past a confused Eileen. Thwack! The arrow lands just inches from Eileen's feet, shocking her. Eileen stares in horror, thinking an arrow ? As a frantic Piot screams her name. Prince Robert yells for Piot to protect Eileen as he rushes to their side. Drawing his sword, Robert stands guard in front of Piot and Eileen, demanding to know who the attacker is. While Robert stands watch, Piot clutches Eileen and wonders where the attack came from. Robert orders everyone to hide, assessing that they are facing 1 or 2 assassins. A masked, hooded assassin observes from afar, believing he hasn't been spotted, and can therefore be less cautious. More arrows rain down, surprising Robert as he stands ready with his sword. Clang. Robert determinedly deflects an arrow with his sword. From the balcony, Kiwi shouts that he saw the attacker behind the flower bed, causing the now exposed assassin to wonder what to do next. A deflected arrow shard grazes Robert's cheek as the surprised assassin looks on. Clutching his bleeding cheek, a determined Robert resolves to capture the assassin immediately. With a fierce glint in his eye, Robert prepares to move. Robert lunges towards the startled, hooded assassin. Their weapons clash as Robert and the assassin engage in a fierce sword fight. The assassin lands a powerful kick, sending Robert flying backwards. Crying out in pain, Robert lands hard in a bed of red flowers. The assassin commends Robert's skill but tells him to stay down as the prince coughs, wounded. Piat screams for your highness, while a horrified Eileen cries out Robert's name. The assassin smugly tells the downed Robert that he almost got him. The assassin's attention shifts to a terrified Eileen, whom he addresses as Dragon Eileen. Kiwi shouts from the balcony that the assassin will have to deal with him first, but the assassin claims he was just curious about Eileen. The assassin admits he was eager to see her himself after the idiot he sent last time failed so horribly. Piat realizes he was behind the previous attack, while the assassin mockingly asks Eileen if she wants to kill him now. The assassin lunges, taunting Eileen about being a dragon. A weapon flies directly at a horrified Eileen. Thwack, a dagger lands just beside Eileen, startling her. Eileen stares in wide-eyed amazement, thinking to herself that her opponent really does have a dragon. Kiwi stands on the balcony with Piat and Eileen, telling the assassin to calm down. Kiwi smirks, pulling a gem from his collar and asking if the assassin prefers his attack, or getting his head smashed. The assassin looks down, thinking to himself that he has lost. Raising his hands in surrender, the assassin asks if they're happy, then notices something in his own hand. Watching from above, Robert wonders what the assassin is doing, as the man laughs and says he can't avoid an attack this close. Kiwi, now on the ground, aims a slingshot at the assassin, refusing to let him escape after he attacked first. The assassin resigns himself to his fate, but Kiwi notices an object in his hand and demands to know what it is. The assassin reveals a small device, declaring that he will have to do things his own way. He throws a spiked bomb towards the group, his eye gleaming with intent. Boom! A massive explosion shakes the conservatory. A voice expresses shock that there was a bomb in the garden. The narration continues with horror, realizing that Eileen was under attack. The furious king declares that the intruder broke in and escaped, vowing, "How dare he?" In his office, the king proclaims the attack a threat and an insult to the nation of Yulia. As Kiwi looks on with irritation, Piat holds Eileen, thinking it's only a matter of time before other countries find out about her. The king slams his hand on the desk, declaring that anyone who harms Eileen will be considered an enemy. He decides that Eileen no longer needs to hide, as revealing her will be safer. The king orders a red-bearded knight named Sir Tyrant to protect Eileen, and the knight accepts. The white-haired advisor starts to protest the king's lack of concern for the prince, but the king's glare silences him. The flustered advisor thinks to himself that the king has been so cold lately. Knock, knock. A guard announces that both Prince Robert and Prince Eric are here to see the king, who finds their joint visit unusual and lets them in. Piat, holding Eileen, greets a bandaged Prince Robert, who stays silent as the king asks him what's wrong. Robert declares that he must be punished for failing to protect Eileen, but the king asks what he means by that. The king furiously states that the attacker was no ordinary assassin, which the white-haired advisor confirms, adding it would have been worse without Robert. Prince Eric confronts a silent Robert, accusing him of being mad because he lost and calling him an idiot. Sir Tyrant looks on, wishing he could say something comforting to Robert, but not knowing the right words. Kiwi tells Robert that hollow praise won't help and questions why he is being so stubborn about the incident. Admiringly, the red-bearded Sir Tyrant thinks to himself that Kiwi is very confident, wondering if her name is Kiwi. A loud cry of protest echoes from inside the palace as the scene shifts indoors. Kiwi enthusiastically presents a bowl and ladle, ready to feed someone. Eileen looks disgusted by the mucky-looking oatmeal banana puree Kiwi has prepared for her. Despite Eileen's protests, Kiwi shoves the spoon into her mouth with a determined shove. Kiwi proudly asks if his cooking is good, since the royal chef is on break, as a green-faced Eileen thinks to herself, "Don't ever cook." Thump thump. Sir Tyrant approaches the table as Kiwi, holding a spoonful of food for a sick-looking Eileen, asks if he is Sir Temerin. With a brilliant smile, Sir Temerin proudly vows to protect Eileen with his life, now that he's her guard. Eileen eyes the knight's overly enthusiastic reaction, thinking to herself that his behavior is suspicious. Kiwi announces he must leave and asks Sir Temerin to watch Eileen, to which the knight nervously agrees, vowing to protect her. Looking back with a grin, Kiwi tells the knight to just call him Kiwi and drop the miss. A blushing Sir Temerin mumbles to himself that Kiwi truly is a mysterious woman. Smash! The sound of shattering glass echoes violently. Drip! The king stares ahead silently, a fresh cut on his cheek, bleeding slightly. A brown-haired woman reminds a fuming blonde woman that anyone who threatens the king, regardless of status, will be removed. The blonde queen continues to fume, her expression a mask of pure shock and anger. The queen angrily demands to know the motive for placing Sir Temerin next to that. The king sighs that the conversation is going nowhere and dismisses her question about his motives. The queen shouts, demanding to know why Temerin must protect the dragon, arguing Eileen is powerful enough to protect herself. Amused, the king scoffs at her outburst and coolly reminds her that he is the king of the country. The king smiles cruelly, suggesting that the queen still hasn't come to her senses. With a menacing grin, the king insults the queen's family, claiming they would stir up trouble if they were in power. The queen grits her teeth in silent fury, her eyes wide with shock and rage. The king's female attendant tells him his words are excessive, but he coldly replies that it's a fact from recorded history. A shocking decree is shown, stating a candidate will be exempted from succeeding the throne, leaving the queen horrified. A credits page lists the staff members of the production team with stylized names and titles. In a formal portrait, the queen stands in an ornate gown. As narration explains, she has been surrounded by opinions since her ascension. A flashback shows a previous, long, black-haired queen speaking with a blonde maid in a grand hall. A blonde woman smirks as the narration explains that after the former queen died of an illness, rumors spread that her death was caused by a curse, shown over an intricate magic circle. The tale continues claiming that Sophia's family, Andrea, helped her seduce Emperor Loki and give birth to Prince Eric, as shown in a flashback. A violent image warns that anyone spreading rumors or opposing the queen will be killed. A flashback reveals General Temerin, commander of Julia's Knight, standing victorious over defeated men. The narration explains that Temerin exposed the Andrea family's decay, causing Emperor Loki to grow cold toward the queen. A grim guillotine is shown as the story reveals the king executed the entire Andrea family. The narration clarifies that everyone in the Andrea family met this fate. This included her only son, Eric, shown as a smiling baby holding an adult's hand. The veiled queen weeps, thinking of the child. Returning to the present, the queen thinks to herself that threatening the emperor is not a good look. The king coldly continues his warning, stating that if this happens again, the person involved will never have a chance to inherit the throne, leaving the queen stunned and horrified. The queen internalizes the threat, understanding that her husband is not joking. The king warns someone off-screen that lately, things have gone too far. He asks a silent Queen Sophia if she understands what he is talking about. Bidding him farewell, the silent queen gets up to leave the dining hall. Turn! With a final, "See you later," the queen turns and walks away from the king. She pauses, suddenly bringing up the dragon they had just discussed. The king sternly reminds her that the dragon's name is Eileen, and to not be so impolite. Slamador closes forcefully, ending the tense conversation. As she walks down a grand hall with an attendant, the narration states she is Your Majesty the Queen. Fuming, the queen thinks to herself what a troublesome woman she's dealing with. The footsteps of an approaching figure echo through the palace halls. Sir Temerin arrives, asking a brown-haired maid if Kiwi Nim is there. She confirms he is looking for Sir Kiwi. Sir Temerin laughs boisterously, announcing that he has brought what Kiwi requested yesterday. The maid expresses surprise that Kiwi would ask for help, but Temerin proudly claims it's a sign of trust. An ornate blue potion is shown, presumably the item Temerin has brought. The maid reminds a flustered Sir Temerin about their promise to take Eileen out, despite his meeting with Kiwi. The maid leans down and sweetly asks the wide-eyed Eileen where she wants to go. Sir Temerin dismisses his earlier seriousness as a joke, telling the annoyed maid about a place with beautiful scenery. Kneeling before Eileen, Sir Temerin formally invites the child to come with them. In the background, Two women argue over whether one was allowed to use something she didn't. Sir Tamarin and the maid look over, wondering why two people are arguing in the hall and recognizing who they are. Sir Tamarin quickly moves to intervene in the escalating argument. He rushes down the red-carpeted hall toward the commotion. His laced boots pound against the floor as he hurries to the scene. Holding a startled Eileen, the brown-haired maid cries out in concern for the two involved. Sir Tamarin arrives just in time to catch a stumbling Kiwi. Holding Kiwi, Sir Tamarin asks what happened, but a dazed Kiwi finds it hard to explain. A blonde lady-in-waiting orders Tamarin to arrest a woman named Sylvia, who in turn accuses the blonde of threatening her over the Queen's jade comb, while Kiwi tries to de-escalate. Kiwi shouts for both women to stop arguing in the middle of the hall. Queen Sophia arrives elegantly, fanning herself and asking someone to explain the situation. The maid holds Eileen close, thinking she doesn't want to get involved with Queen Sophia, whom she believes is not on their side. The lady-in-waiting, Sylvia, complains to the Queen, calling Kiwi a beggar who accosted her. The Queen observes Kiwi with a slight smile, remarking that he claimed to have the Emperor's permission. With a menacing grin, the Queen thinks to herself that they don't even consider her anymore. Queen Sophia tells Kiwi his begging is useless, but he retorts that he did nothing wrong and was pushed away, demanding that she stop. The Queen stares in wide-eyed horror, clutching her fan tightly. Crack! The Queen viciously slaps Kiwi across the face, calling him arrogant. A stunned Kiwi reels from the blow, as the Queen thinks that the Emperor has spoiled him into arrogance. Sir Tamarin, the maid, and Eileen all cry out in shock at the Queen's violence towards Kiwi. Clutching his bruised cheek, a fallen Kiwi mutters, "Oh God." As Sir Tamarin steps in to protect Kiwi, the other blonde lady-in-waiting demands to know what he is doing. Bowing his head, Sir Tamarin apologizes to Queen Sophia but insists he must intervene. Tamarin declares he can't just stand by and watch as the Queen glares at him, saying his name with cold fury. As Tamarin suggests they calm Eileen, the child suddenly leaps towards Queen Sophia, causing another lady-in-waiting to scream in terror. The terrified Queen curses the damned dragon as Eileen clings to her dress. The Queen screams for someone to get the horrible beast off of her, while Kiwi pleads for Eileen to calm down. Sir Tamarin urges Kiwi to get out of there, vowing to handle the chaotic situation himself. The scene transitions to a quiet, ornate room filled with morning light. After regaining her composure, the Queen unexpectedly tries to de-escalate the situation. The scene shows a group of noblewomen from behind, their faces and intentions unclear. Holding Eileen, a pensive Kiwi thinks to himself that no matter how he considers it, he still doesn't understand what just happened. Holding a startled Eileen, Kiwi declares she is the weirdest dragon he has ever seen as she asks what he is writing. Kiwi then asks Eileen if she has any memories of her previous life, to which she thoughtfully replies, The brown-haired maid, Piat, privately considers that the previous life in question might not be Eileen's human one. As Kiwi reacts with a thoughtful, really, Eileen grunts in response from his lap. Kiwi pinches Eileen's cheeks, asking why she isn't angry, as she protests that it hurts and her cheeks are swelling. Still squishing her face, Kiwi wonders why her eye color isn't changing as it normally would. Eileen stares at her reflection in a hand mirror, realizing with a start that she has never actually seen her own face before. A wide-eyed Eileen stammers in amazement as she takes in her own unique, golden-eyed appearance. Kiwi encourages Eileen to look in the mirror while trying to spit fire to see what happens. He explains that her yellow eyes will change color, and her reflection shockingly reveals them turning a brilliant, fiery red. Sitting on the bed, Kiwi explains that the darker her eyes become, the more her reason will fade, and her aggression will rise. Kiwi flips through a book, suggesting that with age, she will eventually learn to control her powers. He muses on the strangeness of her memory loss, stating that while a dragon's body dies, its soul does not. Kiwi recalls the story of the Pillion Empire's dragon, which fell long ago after killing its owner and burning everything before vanishing, leaving few survivors or records. The maid Piat enters the room calling for Kiwi, who asks what's wrong as she announces she's found him. Kiwi leaps up in alarm, asking if the Queen wants him arrested, but Piat calmly assures him the guards would already be there. Piat urgently announces that the king has summoned both of them to his office immediately. As they head toward the office, Kiwi thinks with relief that at least the summons isn't from the Queen. Kiwi determinedly leads a small Eileen by the hand down a long, red-carpeted palace hall. Two maids greet them at a large set of doors, informing them that the king is waiting inside. Kiwi cautiously peeks into the room, announcing himself with a hesitant, "Well, excuse me?" A handsome, lavender-haired man asks who they are, prompting a shocked reaction from Kiwi. Eileen is instantly captivated by the man's good looks, while Kiwi is stressed, thinking he wasn't told about a guest. The man introduces himself as Prince Theodore of the Pan Empire, explaining that he has heard a lot about them. As Theodore formally introduces himself, Kiwi stands stunned, thinking to himself, Pan Empire. Theodore smiles warmly at Eileen Dashia, extending a hand and expressing his desire to get to know her. A flustered Eileen wonders why everyone is so good-looking as Theodore invites her to the Pan Empire, promising the best treatment. The king coldly interrupts, telling Theodore not to speak to her without permission. But the prince just laughs it off as a joke. The king angrily accuses Theodore of showing up unannounced and threatening to expose Eileen's existence. The king says he's bothered by the recent assassination attempt and asks if the Pan Empire was involved, but Theodore feigns ignorance. Prince Theodore smirks slyly, confessing that after all this, he, quote, kind of wants her now. Kiwi, the king, and Eileen all stare in utter shock at Theodore's audacious declaration. Seething with rage from his desk, the king clenches his fist and warns Theodore to watch his mouth. Theodore calmly states he can't hide his feelings, which is met by the king's furious glare. With a confident smirk, Theodore looks at the king and asks, "Can't you?" The king suddenly calls out Eileen's name, startling the small girl. As he leaves, Prince Theodore looks back with a sly smile, promising that he will see them again. In a different, red outfit, Theodore repeats his promise to see them soon as he exits. The tense audience continues as Eileen looks up at the stern king and his elderly advisor. The king dismisses everyone from the room, ordering them all to leave except for Eileen. Kiwi gives a reluctant yes as he glances back before leaving the king's office. Left alone with the king, Eileen wonders what is wrong and why Kiwi was so tense. Eileen muses that the king is different today and wonders if he knows the prince, just as he calls her name. The king gently lifts Eileen onto his lap, holding her in his arms. Eileen gazes up at the king, her eyes sparkling with adoration and charm. Looking down at the child, the king thinks protectively that he will not let Theodore take her. The scene transitions, focusing on a stack of books and a quill on the king's ornate desk. In another room, Prince Theodore, dressed in a robe, casually greets Kiwi. Kiwi, now in a dark hooded cloak, glares at the prince and calls him an idiot. Furious, Kiwi shoves his hand in Theodore's face, telling him to shut up and go away. Prince Theodore snatches the item from Kiwi's hand, asking what it is. Kiwi explains that it's a cream he made. Theodore recalls seeing Kiwi wounded and asks if he neglected the injury, but Kiwi admits he couldn't call a doctor. Laughing, Theodore teases Kiwi for worrying about him, calling him a true friend. Kiwi angrily tells Theodore they need to talk, warning him to stay away from Eileen. The scene shifts back to Eileen, who sits on the floor with a royal seal and a long scroll. Knock, knock. A voice from outside the king's office asks if His Highness has a moment. A blonde woman in an elegant blue gown bursts into the room. Startled, Eileen peeks out from behind a pillar, thinking that it's the queen. The king glares defiantly, asking the queen if she has a problem with Eileen being there, because he allowed it. The king calls for Eileen to come to him as she hides behind the queen, who complains that he won't even let his own son enter. The queen acknowledges the dragon's importance, but questions if the king is taking things too far. Holding Eileen protectively, the king looks back at the queen with a stern expression. The queen eyes the child in the king's arms and remarks with surprise, "Oh? A daughter." With a menacing smirk, the king tells the queen that he really likes that idea. Suddenly, the king lifts a startled Eileen high into the air. Smiling joyfully, the king holds Eileen aloft and asks if she wants to be a princess. Both Eileen and the queen react in absolute shock to the king's question. A giddy Eileen sparkles with pure delight at the thought of becoming a princess. As Eileen realizes this would make the queen her mother, she looks over to see the queen radiating pure fury. The queen's face contorts into a terrifying, wrathful snarl. The king asks if he looks like he's joking and declares he will begin the adoption process. The king banishes the furious queen, ordering her to leave and never enter his office without permission again. In the hallway, a concerned Sylvia greets the queen, calling out to Her Highness. The queen asks a startled Sylvia if she knows anyone who is an expert on dragons. With a dangerously intense glare, the queen orders Sylvia to find that person immediately. Back in the throne room, the king's advisor asks him why he can't simply adopt the child. The advisor explains that they learned long ago it's best not to get too close to a dragon. The king agrees, stating he knows it's because dragons are seen as evil beings who use humans. The king's expression hardens with unwavering resolve. The advisor, interpreting the king's look, hesitantly says he thinks it's a good idea. The advisor agrees, of course, but then trails off with a worried, "However." The king watches his advisor intently, waiting for him to state the problem. The advisor explains that since both parents must agree to an adoption, the king will have to ask the queen for her opinion. The king buries his face in his hand, utterly frustrated by the roadblock. He thinks grimly to himself that she will never agree to the adoption. His thoughts turn to Queen Sophia, who is obsessed with power and wants only her son, Eric, to inherit the throne. The king suddenly points at his startled advisor, catching him off guard. With a sly grin, the king declares he will speak with the advisor again after he has a talk with the queen,